with as many. Oh, perfect. And this is going to be recorded. And pick as many options as apply to you. So I'm going to go ahead and relaunch that. Perfect. And you should be seeing a poll on your screen.
I tried to add my choices, and it's like hosts and panelists can't vote. I'm like, come on.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, a few more answers trickling in.
I think you should add a checklist option for goat or
if you actually are the goat or sheep, that would be perfect. Perfect. Okay, cool. We got all of our responses in, so I should be able to share results with our lovely speakers. And here you are. So as those are up, can folks see, can y'all see the results?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. As those are up, I'll just start off with a quick intro to what we're doing here for our audience. Thank you so much for coming. First off, this is a project of the Ventura County Wildfire Collaborative, which is a coalition of wildfire mitigation organizations here in Ventura County. Our partners include Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council, Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council, Bell Canyon Fire Safe Council, Ventura Park Fire Safe Council, the Ventura County Fire Department, and Jensen Hughes. So this is just one aspect of a really large project that we have had underway for a couple of years. And this funding is provided by CAL FIRE, their wildfire prevention program, and California Climate Investments. So shout out to them for making this all possible. This is part of our quarterly wildfire speaker series. So we have lots of these once every quarter, and we really, really value your input, what you would like to hear. The recordings are all posted on our website. So after this is all done and over with, if you really, really liked it, you can come back and refer to the information you learned here. And if you would like to learn about anything in the future, please do let us know. We'll be following up with emails, but you can also just throw it in the chat. Tonight, we are joined by some really knowledgeable professionals in the field of prescribed grazing, and we're so happy to have them. So we have Michael Leicht here from Ventura Brush Goats, which is a family-owned weed abatement and soil improvement service based here in Ventura County. They graze fire breaks and eliminate invasive brush while also restoring natural fertility with their goat herd. So Michael, you can say hi to the people.
So are we going to introduce everybody, or do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll just
okay.
just say a quick hello, and I'll introduce our other speakers as well.
All right. Hi, I'm Michael, Ventura Brush Goats.
Awesome, thank you. And Dylan and Cole are here from Shepherdess Land and Livestock Co., which is 100% woman-owned and operated business providing contract grazing services for vegetation management using holistic prescribed grazing methods with goats and sheep. Let's go ahead and say hello.
Hi, thank you so much, Mason, for having us, and salute to our comrade grazer and our community members. We're stoked to be here, and I'll hand it off to you, Dylan. Say hi.
Yeah, hello. I'm happy to be here. Talk about grazing fire.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much again for joining. We'll get into the speaker session now. I know we have a lot to learn from you, so I'm going ahead and stop sharing that poll here. So hopefully that's not in your way anymore. And we're going to get some photos up on the screen. All right. Michael, feel free to take it away as long as your pictures are showing okay.
Here they are. Hopefully everybody can see that. Again, my name is Michael, and I am the owner and operator of Ventura Brush Goats. We're a vegetation management company based in Ventura County, where we work primarily. We also do work in Santa Barbara, LA, and surrounding counties. And so we're talking about prescribed grazing. Primarily that's focused on fire fuel reduction and wildfire prevention. But there's other reasons for practicing prescribed grazing, also known as rotational grazing, and a few other names too. But basically what it involves is using ruminant grazing animals to accomplish a ecosystem function goal that we have in mind. So okay, we can go to the next slide. So we're right on the precipice of a big storm. We're going to get a whole bunch of rainfall here in Ventura County. And when that happens, there's a lot of management that changes. This is a picture of the last storm that we had. Some of the challenges that the weather creates is during kidding and lambing, which is when the animals are giving birth, they can get disoriented or separated from their young, and so in this picture I'm bottle feeding one of the kids that got separated from its mother. This is to show that we're not working with mechanical or chemical methods of Ventura of vegetation management. This is a biological process, and because of that, we have to put the animals and the land first. We cannot get a new transmission or a new pump for these animals. They're living things, and so they're the main focus of what we're doing as we're accomplishing our goals. This a photo of a litter of livestock guardian puppies. They help us to do our job. We are responsible for making sure that the sheep and goats are protected from predators such as mountain lions and coyotes. The cool thing about guardian dogs is that their alarm and warning barking will dissuade predators from coming around. Even if a mountain lion could win a fight with a dog or even two dogs, they don't want to mess with it. They can find a deer unguarded by dogs. And so because of this, we don't really have any conflict or interaction with wildlife, apex predators. And so there's no need to trap them or confront them. We kind of get in with the herd guarded by guardian dogs and get out and move on to the next project before we have any negative interactions with wildlife. And we couldn't do that without these dogs. Next slide. Here's some adult dogs. There is an Anatolian Shepherd and a Great Pyrenees. That's Peter and Callie in the photo. This is a contract that we do once or twice a year for a solar energy company. And as you can see, this solar array was actually made taller. And one of the reasons why the solar panels are so high off the ground is to accommodate the livestock, because they are such a cost-effective and efficient means of vegetation management. And so rather than having to get in there with machines, burning fossil fuels with weed whackers or tractors, we can put the sheep and goats in here. I don't have a before and after of this particular contract, but you can imagine when I described that all of the vegetation you see in this photo was removed, making the solar panel array fire safe and also easy to access for maintenance, without having to go over and compact or harm the soil with machines or chemicals. Next slide. Some of the other goals that we try to achieve, other than fire fuel reduction, can be vegetation management for other purposes. This photo is shot as we are herding a group of sheep over to a vineyard in Ojai. It can be really challenging to manage vegetation in vineyards because of the trellising and infrastructure in the vines. And the sheep get in there and they do a really good job, but they're also fertilizing and they're not disturbing the soil. And in the vineyard, it's particularly important to maintain healthy soil biology, because that's where the vines are living for decades. And if you don't take care of the soil, the vines aren't going to grow well, and they're not going to produce very well. Next slide. Another use for prescribed grazing, other than fire fuel reduction, is in this hay field here. You can see the before and after from right to left. And in this field, if it were disked with a tractor, the tractor would have to invert the soil layers, disrupting the soil biology, causing a hard pan, which eventually would have to be ripped up by an even larger tractor. And it can be either a self-perpetuating cycle of soil abuse, or in rotational grazing, the great thing is that you can improve the soil year after year and maintain high quality yields without having to damage the soil or use excess fossil fuels. Let's go to the next slide. This is a no-till seeder. This is a really special implement attached to that tractor, and it's pulling the no-till seeder on ground that we grazed last fall with about 1,000 sheep and goats. We brought in some sheep from another operation to help us with this 80-acre hayfield. And what we did was we grazed the ground pretty hard. We maintained a high stocking density, which is to say we put a lot of animals in there, and we kept their paddock sizes small. And so even though it was 80 acres, we didn't give it to them all at once. We gave it to them in 2 or 3 acre segments, and with that many animals moving every single day, it affected what you can see there. There's no vegetation in that hayfield, and so there was no need for them to disc the hayfield with a tractor. So this no-till seeder can go in there, and it just puts the seeds right in the ground without having to do so many other passes with a tractor. Like in a conventional hayfield, you'll see a disking pass and then a cultivating pass, maybe multiple cultivating passes, and then a seeding pass. But this is just eliminating all of those 3 or 4 passes with the tractor And so it's again beneficial for the soil and the ecology. Another thing I want to mention too is when you're disturbing soil and then you have rain events like the one we're about to experience tonight, you get water runoff, and so you're losing your topsoil, which is one of our most valuable resources. But when that topsoil ends up in the wrong place and it ends up in our watershed, you can get nutrients in the watershed that don't belong there, like nitrogen and phosphorus, which can cause algae blooms. It can cause red tides and can be really damaging to marine life. So what we do here on our agricultural and open spaces has impacts across a lot of different ecosystems from the top to the very bottom of our watershed. Let's go to the next slide. Here's a good classic before and after of someone who simply wanted their lawn mowed, so to speak. And you can see how really effective these animals are. They're an extremely efficient, viable method of vegetation management. Next slide. Here's a little bit steeper ground. It's not the steepest ground we've worked on, but in some places it can be too dangerous to put a crew of humans with weed whackers. And so all of the benefits of rotational grazing aside, sometimes it's the most practical or even the only option. Again, look at how effective it is. This mustard on the left is in some places 5 and 6 feet tall, and the goats and sheep just annihilate it. We can go to the next slide. People are often ask me, well, what about when the brush is dried? Do they eat the dried brush? And the short answer is yes. And to go a little bit deeper into that, the dried brush, here you're looking at really tall yellow star thistle. It doesn't contain as much protein, and so the animals cannot digest it as well. And so what we can do is to supplement their diet with another form of protein. And not pictured here, but in the paddock that you're looking at is a tub with protein that they can nibble on and then go out and tackle all of that brush. The yellow star thistle is something that goats will incredibly eat, even though it's very thorny and a real pain to weed whack. And when you're weed whacking and also mowing with a tractor, you're scattering the seeds around and just replanting them. When the goats eat the seeds and digest them, the vast majority of the seeds are destroyed in their gut. And so that's yet another benefit of prescribed grazing, eliminating the noxious weed seeds from going back into the seed bank. Another thing I want to mention in this photo, our fences that you see here are 42 inches tall, and in some spots, incredibly, this stand of yellow star thistle has grown almost double that height. And when you talk about wildfire and fire fuels, the flame length of the head of a wildfire will typically reach 4 times the height of the fire fuel. And so if we're looking at 6 to 8 foot vegetation and you multiply that by 4, you have flame length that are taller than a multi-story building. And in the foreground, you can see that there's just a little bit of litter left. And if you could go in that paddock where the goats grazed and toss a whole matchbook on the ground, and maybe 90% of those matches wouldn't light anything, and if anything did catch on fire, the rate of spread would be very slow, and it would give first responders a lot of time to work in the area and protect structures. Next slide. Here's a good steep ground photo, and just over the ridge of this photo is a home of a vineyard, and a client of ours who lives in a fire corridor, lost their insurance because after the Thomas fire, it became just impossible, I think, for insurance companies to keep everybody on. And so the only option for these folks and others in their position is to get state insurance, which often won't cover the value that it's needed for. And so their next best choice was to hire prescribed grazing goats to come in, and in the foreground you can see how thick the brush is, and that's what was covering this whole hillside. It's kind of hard to describe, but you can barely walk down that hill without tumbling pretty bad. But for the goats and sheep, it's not a problem. They have really agile little legs and feet, and twice as many as we two-leggeds have. Let's go to the next one. I saved this picture for last because it is just really indicative of our bread and butter. Our primary source of income as prescribed grazers is the fire fuel reduction. This is why I began Ventura brush goats. After being evacuated from the Thomas fire, I felt like this was a way that I could engage and interact and give back to my community. And it was disheartening to see the damage from the Thomas fire, but also the broad scale assault on our ecosystem when it came to vegetation management. And I saw people scraping land with metal implements and using chemical herbicides in I guess grossly inapplicable ways. That hillside that you can see is most people would say bulletproof when it comes to wildfire. Of course, it doesn't protect from ember cast, and in the foreground you can see where wildfire would come from. There's always the risk of ember cast, but then you get into the area of home hardening and protecting the home, and making sure you have screens on your vents and keeping your outside furniture protected. Don't have a wooden deck that comes right up onto a wooden wall that goes into your eaves and stuff like that. But this is really the best that you can do when it comes to defensible space, and that was done entirely by prescribed grazing sheep and goats. That's what I got.
Yeah, that's a beautiful kind of capstone picture to capture everything that you're talking about and looking at the landscape kind of from a zoomed out perspective. So thank you so much for sharing, Michael. I'm sure we'll have some more questions for you at the end. We'll transition over to Cole and Dylan, and I can stop sharing if you'd like to start.
Hi, thank you, Michael. I always appreciate seeing what other grazers are doing in terms of different contexts. And I think it's really cool that you highlighted some of the type of work that is really important to prescribed grazing, and how awesome livestock management can be in different contexts like the solar grazing and integrating livestock into crop systems. It's really cool to see that on top of all the other cool things that we can do in fire fuels reduction. So thanks. Your projects are really exciting to see as you're running sheep and goats around vineyards and such in Ojai. So thank you. And thank you, Mason, for inviting us here. We're colleagues, we're comrade grazers, and we do our best to support each other in the Valley, recognizing that we need each other to elevate. And so here we are, comrades here to share what we can about prescribed grazing and all the cool things that are happening in our county. So I'll just give a brief, introduction to myself and Dylan, and then we'll just jump in on some of the other pieces about the not just the fire fuels reduction and the logistics therein, but the ecological benefits and the alternatives to chemicals and mechanical use for treating vegetation that's a fire hazard. How do we create fire safe and fire ready communities with this ecological approach? That means our community members need to know what it takes and what it means to bring livestock into non-traditional areas. So I thank all of our community members who are out here trying to learn how you can support us, how you can use grazing on your properties, and all of the public agencies and the field professionals who are trying to understand how this, how can we deploy the animals to save our people. So thank you. I'm Cole Bush. I'm the owner operator of Shepherdess Land and Livestock. I've been in this field for over a decade, and I'm like to call myself a modern day urban shepherdess. I'm a big advocate for educating folks on this ecological approach, as well as supporting the next generation of folks looking for meaningful and impactful work in land stewardship, working with livestock. So a big part of our work is education, and we're interested in the science and the ecological impacts of what we do. So we're trying our best to understand how we use prescriptive approaches in grazing to do good. Our work is very different than your general livestock operations. Our emphasis is not on specifically raising animals for food or fiber, but we're service providers, and those are byproducts of what we do as land stewards. So that's a little bit of a background on me as the chief shepherdess of the operation, and I'll hand it over to Dylan, who will describe a little bit more about what he does in our operation, and we'll talk a little bit more about our work in the Ojai Valley in Ventura County.
Yeah, thanks, Cole. And thanks again, Mason, for having us out here to talk about this stuff. I'm Dylan Boken, and I've been working with Cole and Shepherdess Land and Livestock for about 2.5 years. I work as the project manager and a lead shepherd. So I'm on the ground most days, and I'm training up new people. And Cole has done in my 2.5 years working with her, she's done all those things. I've been able to build a kind of brother sister gilded business with her, where I market a lot of the lambs that are grown on this fire mitigation grazing, and is the product of a lot of the work that we're doing out there. And yeah, it's been really cool to the more that we work out there, people hire us for different reasons, although one of the largest reasons, especially in Ojai County, people hire us is for the fire mitigation grazing. And it's been really interesting to meet with other professionals and see what sorts of impacts we are actually able to make. And Michael touched on a handful of those in terms of being able to create landscapes that are more compatible for firemen, certainly for hand crews of firemen, and that slow the spread, increase response, increase available response time, things like this. And so I'm happy to be here and talk more about this.
Awesome. Thank you, Dylan. I'm gonna I was saying, oh, we're gonna just like chat, but I got some visuals, so I'm gonna share some visuals. My visuals are compatible with Michael's. Michael showed some really cool, diverse types of grazing projects, but I would like to share with you a little bit more of not just the wildfire prevention aspects of our work, but what are the ecological benefits on top of our fire fuels abatement situation. And I know that there's folks out there, Jane, you asked a question about how many animals or how long will it take for you to get through, 80 acres. Let's talk a little bit of the nuts and bolts of the logistics of how many animals it will take, how much time, what time of year, logistics of transportation, really what we can do as operators and what is viable in terms of scale of projects. I want to answer those questions, and I want to leave adequate time to answer questions. So I'm going to try to breeze through, and then I'll invite you, Dylan, to kind of jump on into some of the slides as they come. So bear with me. You'll see just the general PowerPoint mess, and we'll get right into beautiful slides. So cute and quick. View, normal, presenter, master, where is it? Full screen, here we go, Godspeed. Okay, so we are grazers building resilient landscapes and a culture of care to grow fire safe and fire ready communities. That's why we're here. That's why the RCD is doing this great work, is because we don't want to just be fire safe, but we want to be fire ready. And so what does that mean? It means we got to do cool stuff to make sure that our homes are hardened and we create defensible space. And this is a really great, I don't think you can actually see the full screen. I'm sorry, guys. I think it's a really great slide, because what you see here, you see our clients here on the left and their awesome family. And then on the right are all of our animals. And look at that slope. Look at that crazy slope. Our animals are able to go into places that are pretty obnoxious, you can imagine, for hand crews to go in there. Not alone incredibly expensive and unsafe. Our animals are stoked being there. That's something pretty awesome about this work. Also, I just wanted to say that this family, their home was lost in the Thomas Fire. And so they are doing everything they can to protect their homes, their new home, and whatever it takes. And they are going above and beyond the recommended 100-foot defensible space around their home. They're going above and beyond. And we love our clients, and we love serving our community. These are neighbors of ours, and we're stoked to be serving them and bringing our goats there. I'm going to do a little thing and try to see if I can make it not be annoying and show the whole entire screen. Do you all see the whole screen, or like the presenter view?
The whole screen. Chris said there should be like a icon on the lower left of the screen. Maybe that looks like an open book. I don't have a Mac, so I'm not super familiar.
Oh, so you're seeing like all of the silly stuff? Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm supposed to be like professional stuff.
Try maybe presenter view, like it's like the sixth one down. Try that. Oh no, that didn't work either. We're seeing what you're seeing.
Okay, well, we might just have to riff it with it's been a really weird day in terms of technicalities. I've been on virtual things all day, so pardon. Where do we go from here is the question. Oh, and it's dictating. Now we're really in a thing. Thanks, Chris. Well, maybe we fit to window. All right, I want to be respectful of your time, so I'm going to try to just keep on rolling with this silly situation. So I apologize, I'm not quite sure. All right, and yeah, and Dylan, I'll definitely let you jump in a couple of these additional slides. It'll totally make sense where to hop on in. So why sheep and goats? Well, these guys are pretty cool. They're biological masticators that self-replicate. So, and you know, our weed whippers don't create more weed whippers every year. And that's one of the cool things about working with livestock, is that they can continue to proliferate, and they also, whatever comes in on the front end. So this goat is eating star thistle, which is a big issue in Ventura County. That thing is eating that crazy stuff, and it's dropping it from the backside and bringing carbon and nutrients back into the soil. What happens when you have healthy soil? You grow desirable vegetation that's going to create more resilient landscapes. Why? There's a lot of cool things and byproducts of healthy soils, and maybe Dylan, we can tap into the healthy soils thing when we come into the invasive species deal and pheasant. But this is one of the cool things with browsing and grazing of sheep and goats. Sheep graze, goats browse. They also plow and trample with their bodies. That's called animal impact. And then they dung and urinate, and that's nitrogen and building soil, organic matter. Let's see. Dylan, I know I just threw this slide at you right now, but maybe it would be a good time to talk about some of the other benefits, not just to creating defensible space with prescribed grazing and how we do it, but maybe just kind of rattle through some of those other ecological benefits.
Yeah, and I know that was something that Mason was, interested in discussing on this panel, was like the other scientific principles behind grazing as a fuel management tool. And at its core, the most basic fundamental thing as grazing as a fuel management tool is that we're removing the fuel. I mean, that's if we can reduce the fuel load below 1,000 pounds per acre, that's kind of an arbitrary area that fire professionals have been finding as a good load to remove them. But there's a lot of other benefits that are happening beyond that, and those tie into our mineral cycles and our water cycles and our beneficial organisms and all these sorts of things. And these are all sorts of things that like you were pointing out, that goats and sheep can contribute to a fuel management program that weed whippers just can't do. And so in regards to, say, the water cycle, which is just something that is first and foremost so important, because it really does have a strong relationship with the intensity of fuels, is that not only are our goats and sheep removing the intensity of the fire, the intensity of the fuel, but they're contributing to the quality of the soil. And as they contribute to the quality of the soil through their dung, through their urine, through the impact they put onto the ground, this creates a biological state and a chemical state in the soil that allows a way higher water holding capacity. And because of this higher water holding capacity, not only are the lands less dry and creating just a more humid environment for a fire to burn in that burns slower, but the vegetation stays greener longer throughout the years. And this is like when you see things like mob grazing or holistic plan grazing, things like this practice well, the shoulder seasons where we see a lot of these fires occurring as the seasons begin to change, we have extensions of greener plants, and we also create the ecologies for different types of shoulder species to expand their life into those shoulder seasons. And that's, I mean, just that alone is enough to really reduce the intensity of these fires. A more graspable visual that a lot of people tend to overlook is just the hoof impact alone creates 1,000 little tiny lakes, per acre that hold into an incredible amount of water. And so these are just a few of the other impacts that these grazing animals have on acreage that we treat with grazing animals, rather than just removing the fiber alone. And this is important this is important because not only are we just removing the fuel load, because that fuel load, even in a drought year, comes back every year, but when we continue this sort of management, we can improve the ecology and the landscape year after year after year, and make real progress and return a landscape to an ecology that can withstand fire events and can even benefit from a fire event. And that is kind of one of the larger pictures of what we can work towards through grazing animals on these fire ecologies.
Thank you, Dylan. You made some really epic points on the importance, not just the animals eating the vegetation that's a fire fuel, but what they leave behind and what kind of impacts they do is supporting a healthier ecology, which creates a healthy ecology is a fire safe ecology. We live in a fire ecology, right? Like we totally live in a place that has evolved either with ruminants or with fire. Grazing, prescribed grazing, prescriptive, carefully managed grazing helps to create the conditions that it's not just about reducing the vegetation, but it is all of the other cool things like the water piece. I really liked your analogy of like the visual of hoof prints actually pooling water, and that water gets to go in. When we switch annual grass populations, which are flashy fuels, to more perennial native plant populations, those deep roots of those perennials allow for, when it does rain, the water comes and goes deeper into the soil following those deep root systems of perennials. That's why native plants are just ideal, because they know how to bring that water from the atmosphere deep into the soil. And when we have water in our soils, we are not going to have the same types of fires that are these ultra mega fires. With our prescribed grazing, we're able to reduce the flame length of fires and the rate of speed in which a fire would come through by our animal impact and how we prescribe our grazing. So thank you, Dylan. I'm going to whip through some of these others because I think the most important things of these like short deals is answering questions. So just to follow up with what Dylan said, invasive species management is a huge thing. When you have a monocrop of an invasive species, that lack of biodiversity of a landscape and a vegetation type is an ecology out of balance. An ecology out of balance is not a fire safe or a fire ready ecology. Right here, you can see a project that we did with the Ventura RCD on a post wildfire recovery project, restoration project. And we have been grazing, this is in Happy Valley, Besant Hill. We've been grazing there for several years now, and we're trying to reduce the star thistle populations. You can see that gray area is where the star thistle has been. That was years and years since the fire of overgrowth and thatch of dried desiccated star thistle. And then on the left, on those tan areas, you can see that's where we grazed. Pretty significant. We're excited to see how we transition this landscape to a monocrop of an undesirable invasive species to something that is more diverse. That is what parts.
And just to add another visual to that, I mean, the yellow star thistle is a really interesting thing because it is a species that we are very focused on here in Ventura County, and it's something that, especially, you know, grazed at the right time is a wonderful feed crop for livestock, and even in the poor times of the year, it still sustains them decently. But the only reason I'm saying that is that horses cannot survive on yellow star thistle, and there's something ecologically speaking that just really does invite organisms like sheep and goats into these places where we can come in and manage it. And if we're managing it correctly, yellow star thistle is not what is left behind there, but healthy animals do leave off that land. And it really does seem like an invitation towards this sort of management.
Thank you, Dylan. Annual grasses are what are considered the flashy fuels, the quick things. If a fire was to come through, that's the thing that's going to really whip a fire through. And then as it goes to shrubs and then trees, that's when that's when we really get into big problems because of amber cast and whatnot. But the flashy fuels are the things that actually speed the rate of fire. And so if we can reduce the annual grasses annually or seasonally, then we'll be able to, if a fire does come through, it's going to be a lot slower. Firefighters can defend space if there is that annual grass reduction. And a lot of us have those annual grasses that grow every year. Do we want a weed whipper? I mean, there are months out of the year we all hear weed whippers, you know, doing that work. But how cool would it be if we could deploy the sheep and goats and have a month of sheep and goat grazing in BAWs instead of weed whippers? What is that going to take? Realistically, landowners, you're going to need your neighbors to buy into this to make it economically feasible and logistically feasible for us because of what it takes for us to mobilize the animals. It's a lot of pressure and stress on them. to move. So what we try to do is keep them off trucks as much as possible. And what we want to do is actually just graze from property to property to property as we should. Pastoral, just in a pastoral way, keep animals on hoof, have shepherds and dogs move them. Let's keep them off trucks as much as we can. And that means we really do need our community members and our clients to understand the significance of pooling together land bases of continuous land. So we're not just treating property by property. I think that there's probably space to talk a little bit more about, that should be another event, Mason, about the community supported grazing program in the Ojai Valley, which is working to do just that. Ventura brush goats and shepherdess land and livestock are very much so involved in developing a corridor of defensible space around Ojai, and it's going to require community members to step up and see the importance of how do we stitch together private and public lands to treat large-scale defensible space. So I went way off of the annual grass slide, but annual grasses we need to treat. That was
now, but on that same note, do you want to provide a little bit more detail about what might make a good candidate for prescribed grazing?
Absolutely. That's a great idea. Let's do that.
That's a perfect question, because that's also a question that I had for you.
Let's do that, Dylan.
Well, you're already going on about, I mean, because you're touching on, how, we do get inquiries from a lot of small scale landholders, and we want to be able to help all of these people. And because of the issues you were just talking about, these are some of the challenges that contract grazing companies do have. Is there is a scale issue, the mobilization, the transportation, those are some of the biggest costs to a grazing business. Just getting the animals on the truck and getting the animals over to the property are one of the bigger costs, and especially if we have to mobilize again in just a week or something like that. And so there is this does put a strong incentive on small landholders who want this service to work with their communities to band together and get a bunch of as much contiguous land together as they can, so that we can bring costs down and access more of these jobs and serve our communities better, because there is just a certain amount of overhead that is limiting these practices, of course, outside of other forms of support through the fire, the community fire supportive program, Fire Safe Council.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. That's a really good point. And I think, Michael, you can kind of speak to this as the limitations or challenges we have as of service providers. We want to treat all of your land bases. We really do. But for us to mobilize, it's a lot of work, and it's fuel is expensive. It's pressure on people and animals. So to go into a property that is 1 acre to 2 acres, when we can finish 1 to 2 acres in a day, it just doesn't make sense. That means that we just become truck drivers instead of grazers, and we don't want to do that. So at this point in time, until we really figure out a way where we can make it feasible to have just animals herding from property to property, we're in a space where it is challenging for us to do that smaller acreage. And this is why these speaker series are so important, because we're educating folks on how we can make this feasible for these smaller scale properties to be treated. And I think we're moving in the right direction. I got to say, like, something cool about Ventura County is that we are working to model for other counties around the state how community approaches can work. And that takes community buy-in on both private and public efforts. And the Ojai Fire Safe Council and the leadership there has done a tremendous job of getting stakeholders on the public agency side. And we're really working now as service providers, Ventura Brush Goats, and we are really working as like the front and center. Actually, it's our goats and sheep, front and center to show our community members like what can be done and how to get involved. And it's not just through hiring us to do the work, but to really understand how do we make this accessible and feasible and logical for our whole communities. So I appreciate that. I'm going to be quiet now if there's any other questions. And if there's any other questions regarding like how much time does it take to do what, or how much does it cost, that kind of thing, happy to throw out some general numbers. But
Oh, perfect. So Michelle, sorry, asks, are you limited or unable to work with California fire departments to limit wildfires? So yeah, maybe you can speak to the relationship there if it exists, or if you're still working on it.
Can you ask that one more time?
Yeah, it says, are you limited or unable to work with California fire departments in limiting wildfires?
No, we do work with fire departments. This is a shout out to the Ventura County Fire Department. They have helped plan and fund a number of prescribed grazing projects in Ventura County. I think the most popular prescribed grazing program that the Ventura County Fire Department funds is the Reagan Library, which was in the grazing community famously saved from the easy fire because of the prescribed grazing. And you can see the blackened char right up to the line where the fence was, and it was planned well enough by the fire department that the area that they were grazing, the flames just didn't reach the Reagan Library and everything inside of it. So Santa Barbara County Fire Department too, they plan big prescribed grazing projects. They see the benefit and are happy to work with prescribed grazers. It's also extremely popular in Northern California, and just in the last decade, I think, is it becoming more popular in Southern California.
That's awesome. I had no idea that there was grazing going on for easy fire. This is still somewhat, new to me to learn about, and that's really, really cool to hear. What are the general costs and number of animals needed per acre?
Dylan, you want to take that?
Yeah. Every landscape varies in terms of how fast it's going to go, but I feel comfortable after doing this long enough to throw out a number of if we have 200 animals, grown animals on a piece of land, they're often going to move anywhere from 3/4 to 1.5 acres a day. And if there's reasonable growth there, of course that can vary. We've grazed landscapes where we were grazing 10 acres a day. Some areas are very barren, but that is rare. And you said you wanted to take cost as well. What was general costs and numbers of animals needed per acre? Yeah, and so depending on how we bill a project, that also varies between different landscapes. Whether it's a by day or by acre project. It is not unusual, and not unusual cost per acre is $1,000 an acre. That can also vary depending on landscapes, up and down. So there's a lot of variables, but those are reasonable numbers. Those are pretty usual averages that we have across landscapes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Dylan. I did want to just add my 2 cents onto that. When people consider the cost of this, there's less sticker shock than there has been in the past. But just consider, we hire and have a 24/7 shepherd on site for our projects. So we have to think about that. You have to think about living wages in Ventura County, and you have to think about all of the other costs associated to running and caring for that many animals. And then you have to actually think about, what would you pay hand crews that can, how many humans will it take to do the same work in the same amount of time that our sheep and goats can do? And then you can start understanding what the costs associated are. And our costs have increased, every year. And you'll see, statewide average is about 1,200 acres per acre. Or $1,200 per acre. But again, it depends on the time of year, the vegetation, the difficulty, the complexity, but you should, be thinking about that, and at least a minimum of at least 5 days of grazing, really, for it to make sense for our outfit, depending on where you are.
Definitely. And that's certainly cheaper, right, than the cost of recovery in a lot of cases. So that's another number to consider. We can take one last question. Maybe somebody on the panel is able to answer. Jerry asked, what's the story about the goats and sheep near the Springville overpass?
Well, I guess I'll take that one. Ventura Brush Goats was contacted by the land management company, and they were requesting a bid to clear the vegetation there so that they can remain within their the code of vegetation management as per the Ventura County Fire Department regulations. And so they had previously had a tractor going and mowing it every year. The tractor on flat ground will often be cheaper than our services. That Springville is I want to say 40 acres, and if we were to charge $1,000 per acre at $40,000, there's no way a tractor can mow that for $5,000. But some of the factors that we look at are how steep is the ground, how's the vehicle access, how's the water access, what type of vegetation and how much of it. And when all of those things align in our favor, we can bring our price down. For Ventura Brush Goats, it's really convenient to have that 40-acre contract right by the 101 because we can easily mobilize and get anywhere in Ventura County, right at the artery of our transportation system in Ventura County. And so it's a contract, and it's also a home base of ours for sorts that we come and go from as we do other projects around the county.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. There's a few more questions in the Q&A. I think some of them, panelists, if you're able to see, you might be able to pop in some quick typed answers. So I'll go ahead and go with the second one. We normally hear the term prescribed for using fire before a wildfire can come in. Can you compare and contrast benefits and safety of prescribed grazing versus prescribed fire? Anybody's comfortable speaking to that?
I heard prescribed fire as I was typing, and I was just recently certified as a type 1 firefighter. In order to conduct prescribed fire in Ventura County, I was typing a response to the other question, so I didn't hear the full thing. Was it just about how does fire and grazing work together?
Sure. That's one interpretation. Benefits and safety of the two, kind of comparing.
It's fascinating how similar they are, because if you have looked at composting from a chemical perspective, it is a form of combustion. Decomposition is a form of combustion. And so when you put goats over the land, they're like little flames, and they're actually chemically combusting the organic matter, and they leave the landscape shockingly similar to how a low intensity wildfire would. Low intensity fire doesn't get into the canopy of trees, and it doesn't kill the trees, but it will eliminate flashy fuels. Prescribed grazing will eliminate flashy fuels, and they both have a similar effect that is the opposite of weed whacking, where when you weed whack, you're chopping and dropping the vegetation and you're left with that biomass, that fire fuel on the ground. Prescribed grazing eliminates it into these tiny little pebbles that is their dung, and prescribed fire is also eliminating that vegetation. And so they're extremely similar as far as ecology goes and the fire protective results that you're left with. They're also hard to plan. It's hard to plan a prescribed fire. A lot of resources are needed, and it's hard to mobilize and plan a prescription for grazing. There's different reasons why, but you could imagine a prescribed fire getting away into becoming a wildfire could be comparable to a group of 500 goats getting across the freeway into some place where they don't belong. So they're both kind of hard to contain there. I would say those are some of the parallels you could draw.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those are really great parallels. And I think too, they're similar in the prescriptive manner. We have to be really, really strategic about when and where they are both deployed, right? And that's why there are prescriptions associated with both techniques. Thanks, Michael. And then I think this can be our very last question as Michael types away on the other one, and then we'll turn y'all loose to have an awesome, what is it, Thursday night? Rainy Thursday night. Claire asks, I'm curious about Indigenous grazers and the strategies Native communities utilize in order to work with fire or the ecology's health. Can anybody speak to this? Maybe.
Well, the best folks to speak to this are the actually the Native folks to our region. But having just met with one of the leadership of our local Chumash band in the last few weeks, what I've learned is that the Chumash were not shepherds. They were not grazers. They were hunter-gatherers. And in respect, the way that hunter-gatherers can manage how ruminants move on a landscape. So I can't speak to, grazing animals and those historically cultural practices. Prescribed burns, however, culturally are definitely more significant in this region than prescribed grazing. I think what it comes down to now in looking at our current contemporary context is, how do we steward land and tend land, period? We have to look at the past to inform the future. But what can we do right now, acknowledging the foundations of what we can learn from the peoples who always been here? And that's understanding the land, respecting the land, and listening to the land to inform how we take care of it. I think that those core principles are what can help us to decide what practices are the best thing. So it might not be the practical practice in itself, but what's the foundation and the heart and the core of the practice and how we approach taking care of our land and taking care of our people. That is what we can learn and glean from the historical context of the people that were here and are still here. That's what I have to say about that piece, but I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cole. I think that's a really beautiful answer and a really beautiful capstone to an awesome speaker series. Thanks all for participating and asking questions. I'm going to ask if you're able, Cole, Dylan, Michael, to throw whatever websites you want into the chat where people can maybe learn more about you, or if you have like a company email, if people have questions in the future. I'm sure they would love to learn more from you.
Absolutely, we will be happy to do so. And just a plug for the Farm Bill in this next Farm Bill 2024, I believe. We need folks to learn about the Farm Bill and how to support it. Also, SB 675 is a really important bill that you need to know about. Our Senator Monique Lamone has been an advocate for prescribed grazing, and learning about that bill will be very important. So I'm going to make a plug for that as well. And the Ojai Valley Community Supported Grazing Program from the Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council.
Awesome. And I'll make notes to include all of those in a follow-up packet to our attendees and everybody registered. So you can also see the recording of this, Maybe if you missed out how to go to the bathroom and missed out on a few minutes. Thank you all so much for attending, and thank you presenters for sharing such valuable information with us. It was really a treat to learn from all of you. I appreciated it, spending this rainy evening with you all. And I think unless there's anybody else that needs to plug stuff in the chat, I'll go ahead and end the meeting.
Thank you,
Thank
Mason.
you.
Thanks,
Thank
Grazer.
you. It was great to be here.
Take
Yeah.
care.
Great to have you all. Take care. Stay warm, stay dry, stay safe.